You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
You're listening to Making Tracks Reaction Chat, breaking down the latest in Star Wars programming. Here are your hosts, Mark Mulcaster and Mark Newbold.
Hello and welcome to Making Tracks Reaction Chat, brought to you by those ruffians over at FanthaTracks.com. This is our first watch, chat and review of each episode of Maul, Shadowlord. So, it's probably best to consider this your spoiler warning. If you tuned into this accidentally and you haven't seen the show, you may want to quit whilst you're ahead and jump back in once you've caught up. Maul Shadowlord is the latest animated Star Wars adventure set about 1 year after the end of the Clone Wars, and with the first 2 chapters released on April 6th, there's plenty for us to chat about. But naturally, I can't do it alone. So joining me this week, and hopefully every week, is the writer of many things and my co-host, Mark Newbold. Mark, Maul Shadowlord. The trailers that came out hinted at a series that was going to be darker in tone, grittier than what we've seen before from any Star Wars animation. We've seen the first 2 episodes, so has the creators delivered with that in mind?
I would say definitely yes. It's definitely darker, it's definitely grittier, it's beautifully designed, and in the sense that when the Clone Wars originally started back, nearly 20 years ago now,
yeah,
it definitely felt like a kid's show. It was a kid's pitch show, or certainly a 2007 era kid pitch show. Consequently got darker and darker, deeper and deeper, more lore built in. It's clearly a Filoni thing. To the point where season 7, which was obviously many years later and not that long ago as we speak now, was really just interwoven with all the lore we'd got from before, and of course tying in with Revenge of the Sith as it did brilliantly. So bear in mind that, but also bear in mind that we've had a sequel to the Clone Wars already in The Bad Batch, which was introduced in season 7 and spun off into its own wonderful show, which personally I think should still be carrying on. I think they were crazy to finish it because it was so good. Now we get more Shadowlord, which one was a brilliant treat to learn that this was even coming, and a fantastic character to pin a show around, but also counterintuitive in the sense that you think a Disney era show would want to have a heroic central character.
Yeah.
There's no way you can ever consider Maul heroic. You could certainly consider him tragic, but he makes a lot of his own choices. He's not being led by the tail, particularly at this point, by anyone. Anything other than maybe revenge and reputation and things like that. He's his own man. And here we are with, as you just said, the first 2 episodes landing on the 6th of April. And I was a very happy bunny, or hoojib, I should say, in the Star Wars
Happy hoojib. Absolutely, yeah. No, me too. It always amazes me. I mean, like, the animation was done by CGC again, which is the animation company that's basically done pretty much every single animated Star Wars, done all the Tales and Bad Batch and everything else. So it's a style and an aesthetic that we're quite used to. But yeah, every single time you press play on the first episode, I'm always blown away just by how good everything looks. And with Planet of Janix, to begin with, I was like, are we on Coruscant? Because it had a very kind of Coruscantique feel. It was very urban, very built up. And it just looked lush in respects of, like, there's lots of kind of like colour and vibrancy in that. But it's a great setting because it's mid-rim. It's, as we kind of get through this and what we learn from Lawson as we go through the show, the Empire is kind of present and everybody's aware of it, but it's not Outer Rim, so it's not so far away that it's a lawless planet, but also it's not the core worlds where it means that they're breathing down the neck. So they got a little bit of latitude to bounce around, which I thought was a really interesting place to kind of set this show.
This time period, the Empire, you would assume, would be spreading out from the core. And so, as you say, the further out you get, that exponentially gets a bigger and bigger place.
Yeah.
That you're not going to regularly see the Empire. And as we see throughout these episodes, it feels, especially to Branda, that the thought or the threat or the possibility of the Empire arriving is not a good thing. And not just because it's the Empire and the way they operate. He feels like a man who wants to, in his own personal life, keep some independence, but also for his city and his world wants to keep some independence. Because as soon as the Empire come in, as we know from shows like Andor, once they're there, they never leave. So that's a really strong point to pick out early on from the situation of Janix. And just going back to your point about the design of it, we've seen some videos lately, some explanation of how they've crafted this, how people like Joel Aaron have literally sort of painted on glass to get that painterly feel, which works beautifully, to actually having matte paintings in the show and various other elements that they're using. So in that way, it's an amazing looking place. We reviewed the first issue of Shadow of Maul on Fantha not that long ago. We will soon have Ross Holloway carrying on with the reviews for the rest of the series. And one of the things I really enjoyed about the comic, and actually brought it up in the round table that we had with the producers last week, was the design in the comic was so strong. I couldn't help but make comment in the review that this is so well designed. And so when you actually see it in the show, to see the continuation of that design, and it's a consistent continuation. Yeah, definitely on first view, you look and go, that looks like Coruscant. But then Dayu looked a bit like Coruscant, but with more neon. And we've seen other places, Hosnian Prime in The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
A lot of people thought that was Coruscant, and it kind of looks like it was designed to be Coruscant. They kind of changed tack a little bit. But, so there's clearly metropolitan worlds across the galaxy that are going to have that look. And yet this feels very much like its own thing with, the runways, the speeder lanes going through, the circular design of the police headquarters.
That's right,
just different things in there that just feel that's their kind of design. That's the sort of thing that they would do. So I'm completely enamored by that. I really am.
It looks great. And what I liked about this is that, you've got very few characters, actually, which is quite nice. There's not really many characters that kind of come into this. And obviously, the main one, our main protagonist, you could say it's either Maul or it's Brandon Lawler, depending on which side of the fence you're sitting on.
Or Devon. They could argue Devon.
Yeah, or Devon, exactly. And so you've got Devon as well. It's nice because we've got these Jedi in the city. They're at that point where they're still trying to kind of find their feet and they're scrabbling to, survive. They're having to beg. And as we see, like, Devon's having to steal. And to be fair, she doesn't make a particularly good thief because, like, she takes, 5 steps away and then she gets nicked. So, I probably wouldn't give up the Padawan day job just yet.
Hi, this is David W. Collins, voice actor for Star Wars and sound designer at Skywalker Sound. You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
We know what's happened to the galaxy. We know what's happened to the Jedi. And also, I suppose, over time, you have to increasingly understand and accept that we grew up thinking there was just, as we've said a million times, Ben and Luke and Yoda, and there's a handful of Jedi survived. Actually, in a galaxy of trillions and trillions and trillions, the handful is still going to be, there's a little, maybe not thousands, a significant amount. If you put them all in one place, you'd be like, God, there's a lot of Jedi survived. Order 66
Order 66
in the Purge.
didn't really kind of work, really, did it?
No, not to the degree that they would have really wanted. And there are, I guess, as you go through Star Wars, there's always these certain elements that you kind of think, that doesn't work, that doesn't make sense. We're watching a TV show about a man who literally got chopped in half in episode 1 and fell down a bottomless pit and somehow survived. So anything that you would say, that's stupid, that wouldn't happen, that can't happen in Star Wars, the counter argument is always Darth Maul.
100%, yeah.
So you've just got to let it go sometimes.
Absolutely. But the thing is, at this point, that is all behind him.
He hasn't got a behind. Can we just say he got chopped off at the waist? He's literally behind him.
Yeah, well, it's I'm sure there's some kind of mechanical behind and stuff. But, it's...
Played by Stan Whitwer. Yeah.
It's that whole thing of, like, actually, for him, you can tell this is a character who is seething with rage and has got a lot of revenge, against a lot of people.
It's a weird time for the galaxy, isn't it? Because, the Republic's gone, the Jedi are gone, they're cast as the villains, the Empire is now moving out, and it seems that Brander as a character is, and I'm sure it will get explained why he's so savvy and knowledgeable about the fact that we don't want the Empire here. We don't want them here. Yeah. Because the rest of the galaxy is like, great, peace, security, like Chancellor Palpatine promised. They don't know any different, a lot of them. It's not until they get there that they find out. So that's an interesting wrinkle.
What struck me quite early on in this is that, this is no shade, this very much feels like kind of like a procedural crime drama. And on some levels, like, you could swap out some of these characters and replace them with other characters, even from other franchises, man, and the story would work. He's a thorough cop. He's obviously working way too much more than has meant that, like, his family is taking the back seat. You can see that with the conversation he has with his son.
Who seems like a good kid, doesn't he?
And also, I'm quite curious because, like, when Devon's brought into the headquarters, there's a family picture frame on his desk, Matt.
Yeah.
So like, obviously family's important to him. Then we kind of learn, I think in chapter 2, isn't it, that he's probably split up, or his wife's not there, and obviously his son wants to go and then see her, but he's like, actually, I'm going to take some leave soon. And you can kind of just tell that's the typical kind of look that a kid gets when basically that promise has been made before and is being broken because of work. And it makes that a lot of these characters are very recognisable and very sympathetic, which I think is quite useful, and also something that elevates the series in a way that makes it not just Star Wars, but just makes it like good TV. It's something that's easily engaged, and I reckon that on one level, on some levels, this could actually be quite easily accessible to somebody who doesn't know Star Wars, because Maul's got a very complex history, but I don't think you necessarily need to know about the backstory, but you can get enough from the relationships and what's going on to actually follow along the story and therefore keep you engaged, which I think is a really clever thing to do.
It's a mega clever thing to do. There's a few things on that. One, Matt Michnovetz, the producer, sort of likened Brander. It was one of my questions. My question to them actually was about Brander. And he said, think John McClane. It's that kind of family thing, estranged from the missus, estranged from the kids, that kind of thing. So cop who just throws himself into his work. That's easy for anybody to get that handle on. Goodness knows cop procedurals in the States are huge. So it's a very sensible thing to put together there. And also going back to, the whole tone of it, the cop procedural, Attack of the Clones is essentially a cop procedural. If you watch Obi-Wan trying to figure out the history of the Kyber Dart, meeting with Dexter, chasing it down to Camino, all that stuff, it's a cop show.
It's a film noir kind of vibe to it, hasn't it?
Completely. So Star Wars has done this before, and now Attack of the Clones, I think, very unfairly is seen as one of the lesser Star Wars films. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's one of the most crucial Star Wars films. But that whole backbone through Attack of the Clones feels like it's going to be the backbone through Maul, because there's no way, if and when Brander and Maul come face to face, no contest. It's a lion squashing a mouse. You know what I mean? There's no contest. But in terms of Maul kind of likes the cat and mouse. He's a hunter. He's a predator. He gets the relationship between hunter and prey. And some people in his way are just skittles. Like stormtroopers are just skittles in Star Wars sometimes. They're just there to be knocked out of the way. But sometimes you get that adversarial thing like Kingpin and Daredevil, for example. They like the dance. Batman and Joker, they like the dance.
Yeah.
I get a feeling that Maul and Brandon Lawson are going to kind of be in that tone. They're going to enjoy the challenge.
Because actually one of the things that stood out for me from chapter 1 was the fact that, you're skipping way ahead to near the end of the episode. Sure. When Maul and his kind of team break into the police headquarters, and Maul and Brandon goes face to face, he kind of like knocks him down, and there was enough time for him to decapitate him or something, but he doesn't. And then obviously the blast spots can come in, and so he's occupied. But knowing that Maul is so very much thinking about the plan and the plan within the plan, and is thinking like 20, 30, 100 moves ahead, you kind of do think, I wonder what he's got in store for this character, whether or not he's going to be unwitting porn, or whether or not he's going to be drawn into the whole big caper, as it were. You've got Two Boots and you've got Lawson. Two Boots, because he's a droid, it makes it very easy to just be all about protocol. And you kind of get that sense straight away where he's kind of like, well, really, we should be contacting the Empire and bringing the Empire in. And there you go, that's my Richard
Ayoade impression. It's very good, yeah.
It's very good, I
Very good.
Yeah. So you've got this, got a droid who's it's interesting because he seems more empathetic to the droids that got taken down in the opening heist. In the prologue, where he kind of says, "Oh, it's a shame they were just doing their job," whereas everybody else would be like, "Well, we can put them back together again and they'll be fine." He seems about protocol, whereas Lawson's going to be this guy who's going to dance around between what actually is following the law to the letter, and then also the intent of the law. So, therefore, maybe dancing around and reaching out to underworld contacts and that to get the information that may be kind of seen as being a little bit shady to go through those routes and stuff. So I think he's going to be quite an interesting character, and I'm looking forward to how he develops over this series. Definitely.
I mean, from that Two Boots relationship, Two Boots, as you say, droid, protocol, rules and regs. He's obviously got a relationship with Brander that's beyond just being a droid, being a servant. They're partners. So there's more of a friendship in that sense, which I kind of like. That's why I always like Lando's relationship with robots. I know they over-egged it a bit in Solo. Just a shade. But he treated L3 as an equal. Maybe not completely an equal, but certainly as a trusted sidekick, like Han and Chewie are trusted sidekicks. In that sense, I think Brander and Two Boots have more of a friendship than Han Solo and anything that's ever got a battery inserted into it. Different people, different species, different perceptions of what a droid is across the galaxy is naturally going to be different because it's, everything's different. Brander, because he's quite willing to, or it seems, bend the rules. You've even got the cliche of the chief. giving him, you better get this job done, Lawson, or I want your badge and all that sort of stuff. That kind of vibe. She's the harried boss. She doesn't want the hassle. She's always got a cup of coffee or chav in her hands,
She is getting pressure from above. She seems to be quite an advocate. Everybody seems to be an advocate to get the Empire involved. I think it becomes clear very early on that everybody's like, it's Lawson who kind of actually says, well, look, this isn't a local matter. This is something that's kind of come in externally and taking these guys down. Because at the start of the episode, these two criminal organisations had an understanding, a truce. I'm pretty sure on Janet's you could probably carve a line and there'll be literally one side will be one like Varios and the other side will be the other ones. That's quite fun in itself. It's kind of that whole mobster gangster stuff, which is a really quite cute way of doing stuff. But she obviously, pretty much everybody else, Two Boots especially, is like, I'm a big advocate for the Empire, get them involved, get them doing it. Be interested to see how that plays out. On the other side, on like Maul's side, so it's not the official Shadow Collective of what it used to be of like Pikes and Crimson Dawn and
Black Sun,
but it seems to be made up of primarily Zabraks, who doesn't like a mini Zabrak running around with a massive rotary cannon, and also Mandalorians. And the one that obviously sticks out to me is second in command, which is Rookcast, played by Vanessa Marshall, which is quite fun because as far as I called her the other day, she's kind of playing an evil Lynn version of Sabine. Because like when I first saw her, I was like, hang on a sec, is that Sabine? And then I was like trying to do the work on the timeline, I'm like, no, that's not right. But that's quite fun and it's quite cool just to kind of see that, and also to see like these things that the callbacks to like Death Watch and that by having the Mandalorians with Maul and that. It's a good squad, but I think the MVP is that Spybot. I think he's awesome, who's voiced by David
Collins, yeah.
Yeah, he's mischievous and he's quite cool, so I hope he hangs around as well.
For everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video and social media feeds, bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
It's cool to have Vanessa Marshall involved. As you say, Steve Loom's in there. There's faces and voices that we're familiar with. But Spybot, I thought Spybot was brilliant. When you see Revenge of the Sith and you see the little crab droids go onto Anakin's fighter at the beginning, they're so excited to be there to do their thing, and R2 zaps a load off. And you've seen other droids that, you see it in Jedi, for goodness sake, with the torture droids. They're taking some sort of twisted pleasure in doing these awful things.
Yeah.
And Spybot is 1,000,000% that dialed up to 11. Yeah, he's clearly deriving joy from spying, clues in the name, spying on the enemy and doing all these things that are just going to trip them up. And so I think there's going to be a lot of interesting, fun, whack of the air quotes, moments coming from Spybot as we move through the season and into the second season, hopefully, if he survives. So let's hope he does. The only character we know is going to make it out of this show so far, which is one of the beauties of having a show that's centered around one character. We do know Darth Maul's going to survive, however many seasons of Maul they make.
But that's also the fun thing, because like you said, that he's going to make it through. So the jeopardy's not really there for him.
No,
it's
not
more,
for him.
It's more the interesting thing, like actually, how is he going to turn stuff and leverage stuff?
Maul has the chance to kill Branda and doesn't. And it wouldn't be much of a show if he did. It's clearly, you know what I mean? But there's a moment where in any other circumstance, any other situation, you see it at the beginning, he was lacing through those droids, runs one through the head. He doesn't do it to Branda Lawson. Leverage. I think Lawson is more hooked in, more connected, knows more, is more willing to do the things that he shouldn't do than one his boss knows. I think Two Boots knows more than we know at this point. Obviously knows more than we know. But, I think he's more clued into what Branda's personality is. But I just feel that Maul either through the Force senses it, through research senses it. We just mentioned Spybot. He could have been watching Branda for months for all we know. Yeah. So it just feels like leverage. He's a player. He's a pawn on the gaming table. And so keeping Lawson around as the season progresses, that he is a key player, but not necessarily in the way he thinks he's the hero. He thinks he's the John McClane, but actually Maul is playing him in the way that I think when you look at Maul's psyche, he realises he was played all those years ago.
Yeah.
And never got the chance to get back on the board. Well, this is him starting a new game.
Very nicely put. If you chart Maul's past and stuff, he was very much in a position of confidence and what he thought was going to be like power. Yeah. And then he's cut in half. His legs literally cut out from underneath him. Everything else then kind of happens with his brother. And but what's interesting is that he's quite open. He has this conversation with Rook. He's kind of saying about, now that they've captured Devon as well, he can fashion her as a weapon. Basically, everybody who's betrayed him, everybody who's stood in his way. And also, like, he does mention Darth Sidious, and she seems to recognise the name. Now, whether or not that means that he's said something to her, obviously explained it, but at the same time, they haven't made that connection to the Emperor yet. So I don't know if Maul knows that at that point or not, but it was an interesting conversation.
When you look back at Maul's relationship with Sidious, and we don't know whether Sidious had any apprentices before Maul. I mean, we assume he was the first, but he might not have been the first. But let's say he was. He's his first apprentice. That relationship, to me, I never got the sense that Sidious would sit there with Maul under the learning tree going, this is your pathway to be the greatest Sith ever. Because I don't want you killing me in my sleep, because I killed my master in my sleep, and I don't want it happening to me. But also in the way that when Dooku was his apprentice, Dooku was certainly older than Sidious. So it was a different balance. I wouldn't say he was any more trusted or any less respectful of his master in that sense. But it did feel to me that Dooku and Sidious were far more likely to meet in the works on Coruscant when nobody knew there was anybody there and discuss battle plans and discuss tactics, and that he brought Dooku in at a time when the Clone Wars is happening, where he can use his tactical genius, he can use his influence and his charm and all the stuff that Dooku brought to the dance to get the things that he needed, because goodness knows he was quick enough to let him go when Anakin became the next guy, that he needed the blunt instrument to take forward into the era of the Empire. So it was the right apprentice for the right time. But I never got the sense that Maul was ever privy to anything like what Dooku would have been, and not even what Vader would have been, but they've set up, especially in the comics, much more adversarial, because Anakin has always got that little bit at the back of his head, like, you caused the death of my mother, you caused the death of my wife. All that angst is in there. With Maul now, to your point, going through with his own people, with Rook Cast and the rest of the Zabraks that are there and the other people, certainly with Rook, I agree. I think he probably discusses things with her more than you'll see, but it did seem to me like she was more clued up. He's using her tactical nous and her loyalty in the right way. I think there's probably more conversations going on there than we don't need to see that on screen.
No, we don't need to see that on screen. This isn't a quest for power. This is purely a story about revenge.
Yeah.
You know, this is a story about revenge and taking it out on the people who've wronged him. An interesting, spite-filled thing, but I think probably one of the things that Maul's obviously learned over time is how to use those words to kind of really ignite that passion in people. I mean, even like when Devon's captured and she's like, can you let me out? And he's like, you need to learn to adapt. He's kind of trying to push her towards a more pragmatic worldview. If you think the Jedi had it all very kind of nice and it was all very like, you're an apprentice, you're going to become a Jedi Knight and you're a Jedi Master, then you might end up on the council. He's like saying, you know, look, the world is far more complex than you've ever been shown, and you need to rethink and even learn how to rationalize things in different ways. It's going to be interesting to see how he tries to seduce her to become his apprentice, if that's what he's planning to do.
Yeah.
And I'd imagine with Maul, it'll be quite a long game. I don't imagine it's just going to be one conversation and I now pronounce you Darth Devon or Darth Talon or whatever you want to be called about.
Yeah.
And so I think that will be something to see how that transpires, and also if he's successful, because that would be the interesting thing, if he is successful, because that then changes everything that really kind of goes later on, and it makes a much more interesting conversation.
This is Steve Bloom, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks. May the Force be with you.
As we see Devon as a character progress throughout these two episodes, but beyond, we'll start to get a feeling of what kind of personality she's really got. Is she patient? Is she impatient? Is she quick to anger? Is she slow to anger? All these things that we'll see that Maul will be looking at for those little moments that he can exploit. We know he's a great talker. You know, you think in Phantom Menace, you get a couple of 3 lines out of Maul. That's it. He's not a talker. He turns up, he's not there to talk. When he's going to kill him, he's there to kill him. It's not a conversation. And yet the animated Maul couldn't be different. It's like having Lobot turn up in animation and the guy won't shut up. You know, you know what I mean? But so we know he has the capacity to seduce through his words and show by his actions. And I think the pivot point for this particular thing is with Devon. You know, she's with Docky. He will have explained the state of the galaxy now, that they've got to live in the shadows and all that sort of stuff. Is she the kind of kid that's prepared to do that, prepared to play a long game of which they don't know the rules, they don't know the end result, they don't know where it's going other than you've just got to be patient? Or is she the sort of kid that's like, I want to effect change in the galaxy now, And if she's seduced in the right way, stroke wrong way, that could lead her to becoming an apprentice to Maul in the way that Maul was an apprentice to Sidious. That's all Maul's ever really known, is fighting with a brother who was a subservient, fighting as a subservient to Sidious. So, you've got all these rule of two relationships going on. And he's trying to build another one now, potentially, with Devon. I love the end of the second episode when she's in her prison, Vario going off, and she's looking out, and then he just stops, turns, and looks in at her, and she says his name.
That was one of the questions. I was like, well, actually, that's interesting. She's a Padawan about, and obviously she's aware of him and kind of senses it. And I like that whole thing actually with Maul. It's like at first conversation with Rook, he says, I can sense there's somebody here that I kind of want to meet. And he can kind of sense her. So he's kind of drawn to her already. So he's obviously got his eyes and his sights on her. I think, we're going to hopefully see how that's going to be pushed and how he's going to push her. Because you see that first conversation that she had with her master. And I love his name. Master Iko Daki. Just rolls off the tongue. I mean, I had to write it down like 3 times to kind of remember it. That first conversation when she wants to steal the fruit and he's kind of like, no, let's see if we can just beg for it. Just sense that she's kind of impatient already, so that in itself is like a potential flaw or weakness that hopefully Maul's going to exploit. So, with that in mind, I guess we'll just have to wait and see till next week if he does exploit that. By all means, please send in your listeners' questions or your thoughts or your theories about and reactions, your own reactions to Maul Shadow Lord, because we'd love to read them out. Hey, if you say something really interesting, then we might even bring it up on this little episode as well. So, until next week, Mr. Newbold should tell you how you can send your listeners' questions in.
Yes, I can. Please, as Mark said, send them in. Send them by email, send them by snail mail, post them through my letterbox, or send us a voice note. All of the above are gratefully received. And here's how you can do it.
Email radio@fanthatracks.com. Head to links.fanthatracks.com for links to our social media feeds, Fantha Tracks TV and Fantha Tracks Radio. Thanks to James Semple for the Fantha Tracks intro, Blues Harvest for our Making Tracks opening music, and Mark Daniel and Vanessa Marshall for our voiceovers. New episodes drop Tuesdays and Fridays at 7 o'clock UK time. Our weekly news show Good Morning Tatooine goes live Sundays at 9 o'clock UK time on Facebook and YouTube. And remember, Fantha Tracks is absolutely free, so it costs nothing to stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news.
And that's me done for this episode, mate.
Brilliant. Okay, buddy. Well, look, I will see you on a record for Making Tracks very, very soon. And we will be back next week with another episode of Reaction Chat, which will cover chapters 3 and 4 of Maul Shadow Lord. So until then, everybody stay safe, take care, may the Force be with you, and don't let the double-ended lightsabers get ya.